views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Tonight we do the third in our 4-week series with Bronx State officials. State Senator Jamaal Bailey is with us tonight. We'll ask the freshman senator from the Northeast Bronx about the recent shooting at Bronx Lebanon Hospital and the killing of a Bronx police officer, and what kinds of things can be done maybe to prevent those in the future. We'll also talk about the legislative session just ended, including discussion of mayoral control and some of the politics in the state Senate. We'll also, of course, toss in some questions about a variety of local issues, like building bridges between local teens and the NYPD. So please join me in welcoming the state's youngest senator, who was recently named by City and State magazine as one of the 40 under 40, one of the top 40 most influential New Yorkers under 40 years of age. The 34th district in the Bronx includes the neighborhoods of Wakefield, Baychester, Eastchester, Williamsbridge, and Woodlawn. Senator Jamaal Bailey, nice to have you back.
Gary, good to be here.
Always good to have you. Senator, let's just start your first year in Albany. Just some impressions. How was it? What do you think about what you saw? Did you learn anything? Was there anything good? Did anything not that good? Give us kind of a report.
I love the work that I do. Public service is in my blood, and I really believe that getting up there to do that job was something that was meant for me. The session went pretty well, I would say. There is a learning curve despite me working in the legislature. There's nothing like being a legislator, right? When you actually have to vote for the bills that you're before. You have to read the active list. You have to look at all of the legislation that comes before you and make an informed decision about how you're going to vote and what you're going to vote on. It's an eye-opening experience from a different kind of seat.
You mentioned it here, but you have had experience up in Albany prior to being elected, so being there isn't a surprise. Anything surprise you? Anything that you say, other than the fact that it was your responsibility to actually cast the votes and do the work, but was there anything that you said, gee, I didn't know this?
Well, having worked in the Assembly, the procedures are a lot different in the Senate. The Assembly is a little bit more relaxed, whereas the Senate is a little bit more formal. The rules of the Senate are a little different than the Assembly, and the manner in which votes are recorded and tallied, the manner in which the chamber is run. So learning things like that, learning where the members lounge, finally being able to go to the members lounge as a member is a little different than as a staff member when you kind of were behind that wall wanting to go in. Little things like that were the things that I found challenging. The substance, I mean, I knew legislation, I knew policy, but again, there's nothing like having to do it, so to speak, on game day when you're doing it for the 318,000 people that you represent. It's very important. It's very impactful.
Politics in the state Senate are obviously different than they are in the Assembly. Was that more challenging? Was that more difficult to navigate? And I guess I have to add on there, is there frustration about the IDC, or are you okay with, well, that's the structure we have, let them do what they do? Well,
I mean, Jay-Z had a new album that came out, and there's a song called Family Feud, and I say, to quote him, nobody wins when the family feuds. At the end of the day, we need, as Democrats, to make sure that we unite so that we can start making bigger and better policy decisions for the folks in the state of New York. That's my position. I think that we should be together.
Is there legislation maybe that you say, gee, had we had the IDC as part of the Democratic caucus, maybe the DREAM Act would have been passed, something that you were very interested in?
Yes.
Do you think that might actually be the case?
Well, I mean, there's a possibility, but the reality is that even with the IDC, we would have 31. We would need Senator Felder or one of the members of the Republican side to come over and vote for that. So even if you had the IDC, we need to make sure we would get one more. So we can't just blame the IDC. We have to make sure that we're getting 32 votes, because that's what it takes to pass something in the state Senate. We need 32 votes.
Let's talk about that session as far as how it went. You didn't get an agreement on mayoral control, and the governor, of course, called. I mean, this is a matter of history already. The governor called everybody back, and then ultimately a deal was struck. Why do you think that happened? Why couldn't, and I frankly asked Assemblyman Dinowitz that, who was here last week, why couldn't, I mean, everybody knew the business had to be dealt with one way or the other. Why does it take an extra session to make that happen?
Well, it's kind of above my pay grade. The leaders of the conference, they told me to come back, and I came back, and I was happy to do the business of the state. At the end of the day, we needed to make sure that mayoral control was restored, because I think it would have caused chaos had you allowed it to lapse, and we venture into uncharted territory, because we don't know exactly what would have happened had we not renewed mayoral control by June 30th.
Mm-hmm. So from what I'm gathering is your opinion and your feeling about it is, as long as it happened in the end, let's not worry about kind of what was a protracted process.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say that.
Okay.
I would say that. No, I would say that the process is inherently flawed to some degree. We need to make sure that we finish the people's business on time, as promptly as possible, so that we don't waste taxpayer dollars in bringing us up there again. It's frustrating when, I have a wife and 2 small children, and I have to, when they think that the session's over, it's like, Daddy's home. Daddy's home, and Daddy has to go back up to Albany again. Many legislators face that same thing. But at the end of the day, I'm proud to serve my district. And if the governor or majority leader or anybody calls me up, I will return as called, because I love my job and I love my constituents.
Best thing that happened in your first year? I mean, was there legislation that you are proud of, that you were part of, or that you initiated, or a general thing? What are you most proud of? And we know that you can set goals lower because it's the first 6 months. But I'm curious as to what really energized you.
Actually, I got 5 bills passed. In my first year, and one of them was something I'm really passionate about: worker-owned business and employee-owned businesses, worker cooperatives. I really believe that can be the next wave of progressive economic development. So I'm really happy that that the state is going to be paying attention to worker cooperatives and worker-owned businesses, because I really believe that that's the way to the future in terms of making sure that economic inequality is defeated.
So just judging, the benefits are that it gives local people a better chance to start a business. It gives a greater sense of community because these are worker cooperatives. Having said that, ironically, right on White Plains Road was what I thought was an incredible worker cooperative, was that Arts Craftsman store, yes, which ended up closing. Is that a good example of the kind of thing that you'd like to see more of? And then, of course, unfortunately, it ended up closing.
Well, not the closure, obviously, but I think that the state, what we should be doing is supporting these worker-owned businesses. At the end of the day, a good business idea is a good business idea. A bad business idea is a bad business idea. The state is not here to create great business ideas. We are here to support the worker-owned, the worker cooperative community. I really believe that if you invest in these businesses, if you invest in these people, better governance, studies show, better governance, happier workers, better pay. If a recession hits, instead of everybody making $25 an hour, we'll all make $17 an hour instead of making nothing. They are more recession-proof, so to speak. And I believe that worker-owned businesses and employee-owned businesses are the first step towards cooperative communities like they have in Montevideo in Spain.
What was in the bill that you think will be supportive? And then in this effort, what could or would be the next step to make it happen and, as you say, have the state invest more in these kinds of businesses?
Well, the next step would be, it's aspirational, right, at this point, even though in the state business centers, a state-run employee business center that would provide low-cost loans to these worker-owned businesses, and I think that would be the best way to go forth.
Mm-hmm. You also have expressed, and I've read articles about it where you've been quoted about access to quality food.
Yes.
Talk to me about, and we'll use White Plains Road because it really is kind of an important part of your district. Talk to me about the people who live around White Plains Road in that northeast part of the Bronx. Do they have good access to food? And if not, what will it take to get them better access to quality food so they can, and their children can do better?
So there is access to food, right? But it's not exactly healthy. We don't know the sourcing, and we don't know exactly what the quality of that food would be. We need to ensure that, let me take a step back. there was a study called Nourishing Change from NYU School of Law, which showed that 1 out of 4 families in the city of New York were food insecure, meaning that they did not know where their next meal was coming from, right? On that corridor on White Plains Road, we need to make sure that the individuals that are there, their families and the residents of my district are being taken care of.
Mm-hmm. And how do we do that? Like,
Okay.
what do we do?
Well, one, we need to promote more locally grown produce. Like Bissell Gardens, for example, is a location within my district around 241st Street in the train yard. There's an amazing, if you would never know what's there, Gary. You drive down 241st Street past where the train tracks are, and behind there,
I know exactly where it is.
You know, but a lot of people may not know. It's a sprawling, amazing oasis. Produce and flowers and teaching people how to be self-sufficient for themselves. Rivers Run Garden in Co-op City, another example of a location in my district that is teaching people how to grow their own food. We need to make sure that we're providing rebates for people, especially lower income individuals, to ensure that we incentivize them, like with the SNAP and EBT program, but that we expand that so we can expand access to healthy food. Montefiore has been doing something in terms of like their healthy local businesses and incentivizing bodegas to carry healthier food and healthier products. At the end of the day, the whole community has to buy in.
As a state senator, I mean, you can talk to me about it, and I could say, oh, good idea. And you could even go up to Albany and talk to a colleague and say it's a good idea. How difficult is the process for you to introduce an idea that may be a little different from what other people are suggesting, and then ultimately turn it into either legislation and or a budget consideration so that money can actually go to some of these things that you think you should be supporting?
Well, a lot of that goes back to who's in control. You can introduce whatever great legislation that you want, but if you can't move it out of committee, if you can't get it from committee to rules, and if you can't get it from rules to the floor, then many people won't see, that legislation won't see the light of day. And so I think that as fair as many of the Republican folks may be as people, and they are very fine gentlemen and ladies, sometimes that policy agenda setting is very difficult and frustrating as a Democrat to try to get things through.
You know, just thinking out loud, you talk about, and I know that all of the state officials who've been here so far have been talking about the difference between upstate and downstate, and obviously, rural towns versus New York City. I think this would be something that everybody would be interested in, and if you could, and again, just thinking out loud, if you could draw relationships between the things you want to do and the farmers and the growers upstate, I think we can cut a deal right here on the show and say, let's make it happen. But I think there's a sense of this could be mutually beneficial.
Well, I believe it is. And Senator Rich Funke, who is a Republican from the Rochester area, he had legislation that eventually made it to the budget, the food to farm credit, food to farm tax credit, which got some farmers some tax credit for growing healthy and sustainable food. So, I mean, there is an avenue, but we need to make sure that it stays not only, it doesn't stay above the Tappan Zee or, well, the Mario Cuomo Bridge. It comes all the way down.
I've had numerous conversations with elected officials in your area, whether it be the Speaker, Carl Hastie, or Councilmember King, and one of the things that comes up time and time again in that particular part of the Bronx, and I know that you're concerned with it, I mentioned at the top of the show, is the relationship between young men of color and the NYPD. My sense, and it's just from the people I talk to, and maybe I'm wrong, is that relationships have improved, maybe not perfect, but improved over the last couple of years. Do you sense that, or am I completely off base? Just tell me where we're at.
I believe so. I believe
you
that.
You think we are a little better than we were?
Absolutely. I believe that I'm 34 years old, and when I was growing up, there was very little interaction that I had with police officers. I was never in trouble, but I just didn't see the police officers walking the beat. Now we have the NCOs, neighborhood officers that are coming back out to walk the beats. We have a good inspector in the 47th Precinct, Inspector Stevenson, who is really leading the charge and doing positive things in the community with young folks, book bag drives, and just engaging the community as well. And also, I had a program called Caps Lock, with Butler Memorial United Methodist Church, communities and police, communities and the police coming together to have a better day. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that the police know the communities in which they police, but that the residents understand that the police have a difficult job. It's, to use a sports analogy, we can't expect the police to go 10 for 10 from the field and 10 for 10 from the line every day. A police officer is going to have a bad day. When they do something wrong, they need to be held accountable. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we as residents are assisting police officers however we can.
A horrible story, of course, about the shooting of a police officer in Minnesota's Familia just a couple of days ago. In an odd way, I think it galvanizes people in support of the police, that everybody I've talked to realizes how absolutely abhorrent that act was and unacceptable, and also it underscores what heroes our police officers are. Again, do you have the sense that people have, even horrible things like this, people have greater understanding?
Absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth in terms of the word heroes. I got to go to the vigil at Bronx Lebanon Hospital where they honored the memory of Dr. Tam as well as the Officer Familia. And these young women were everyday heroes. They gave their lives, they served people every single day in the medical profession and as a police officer. And in an ironic twist of fate, I was told that Officer Familia was one of the responding officers to that shooting at Bronx Lebanon. Again,
that's right. She worked the precinct
yes,
in that neighborhood.
yes.
That's actually true.
I was told that. I believe it to be true. So these everyday heroes, we need to look at, one, these officers, 35,000 plus men and women in blue, into policing a city of 8 million. They need our support. We need to be vigilant for them.
Do young men of color in your neighborhood believe that? Or is it still a hard sell? And listen, Ramarley Grande also
Yes.
happened in your neighborhood, and we know what that was about, and we know what the feelings of the community were. But do you have a sense that there's a stronger feeling in that way?
Well, it's like an hourglass, right? The sand is eventually going to come through, and it's got to get to the other side eventually, right? You keep telling the folks in the neighborhood that the police care for you, but then sometimes you see actions that will show the opposite. At the end of the day, we need to come to the table together. United we stand, divided we certainly will fall, and we have shown to fall when we are divided. Young men of color, I don't believe that they necessarily believe it so much right now because of the climate, and when you have Philando Castile being killed in Minnesota by an officer, and that officer being acquitted, and Alton Sterling, I think in South Carolina. No matter how well they do, and these officers, men and women, do their jobs extremely well, what happens is when one of us are killed and there is no accountability. That is the problem for many of the young men of color, I believe, in my neighborhood, and they can't get past that barrier.
Mm-hmm. And so among the ways, just to summarize this part of it, and among the ways that you see to be able to do that is literally just greater contact and greater communication. You talked about book bag drives and all those kinds of things.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, right, when you're like 5 years old and 6 years old, you go to a first grade class, you ask that class, 75% of the class is going to say they want to be a police officer. From that 5
or
to 6
they want to
years,
drive a big truck.
or they want to or they want to go to the NBA and play for the Knicks.
Or the WNBA.
Or the
let's be
WNBA,
fair,
absolutely.
for sure.
I have 2 daughters, Gary. But we need to find out, how do we bridge that gap between that time when that bright-eyed 5-year-old says, I want to be a police officer, to that 16-year-old in that same position not necessarily trusting the police. We need to bridge that gap. We can only do that together.
Fascinating point of view, and I certainly, I'm assuming others appreciate it. The automatic weapon that was used in the Bronx Lebanon shooting got kind of a loophole because AR-15s had been banned, but they had redesigned this one so that it could be sold legally and could be used. You know, on one hand, I never know if it's better whether a gun is obtained legally or illegally. Each one annoys me.
Yes.
If it was illegal, we got to stop that pipeline. If it was legal, goodness gracious, we can't have guns, those kinds of guns in people's hands. And that, to me, cuts to the core of the Democrat-Republican issue in the state Senate because, well, everybody knows how the lines are drawn. What do you think? Do we need more gun legislation? There are people who are saying right now, you know what? New York has the toughest gun laws, and they're still shooting cops. What's your point of view?
Well, that's a very nuanced point of view. I have a very nuanced perspective on it. One is that people who are going to commit evil acts are not going to be dissuaded by certain gun laws. This is true, right? But we need to make sure that we're holding manufacturers accountable, right? gun manufacturers in the state of New York, if people need to have a cause, need to have a cause of action in order to be able to sue if these gun manufacturers are putting these guns in our communities. And right now, we don't necessarily have that. The Senate Democratic Conference has put together a package of gun reform legislation to further strengthen the SAFE Act, to make sure that we keep these illegal guns out of the hands of these criminals. We can't legislate intention. We're not trying to legislate intention, but you need to make sure that you're taking away this iron pipeline. Shut the iron pipeline down, and I think that will be a little bit better.
Is there a chance, I mean, we've had such horrible shootings all across the country, not only, of course, here in the Bronx. Is there a chance that these kinds of episodes, tragedies, would galvanize people in the legislature to come together on it? Or do you think come the fall, you're going to still have a battle over it?
I would hope that this would galvanize people, but at the end of the day, if we saw 20 children killed in Sandy Hook, if that didn't galvanize the NRA and the gun lobby, I don't know whatever will. That's why we, on the ground, need to make sure that we are ever vigilant, and we're letting the manufacturers know, we're letting the NRA know, we're letting people know that this is our community, and we're not going to let you off the hook.
Among the solutions to the kinds of issues that we have just been talking about, whether it be involving young men and women too, of course, in your district, and things for youth to do so they don't get in trouble, and the gang issue is, and I have advocated for this openly on this program for all these years, is better activities, better after-school activities. Speaker Hastie was thrilled when the announcement was made that the YMCA is going to be built in Edenwald. I guess that's where it's going to be. Talk to me about what is going to be there and what your hopes are for the YMCA to impact the kinds of issues that we've been talking about.
Well, one, we need to make sure that the entire community is reflected, that, juniors and seniors, that the young people and the seniors in the community are taken care of. We need to make sure that that's happening, that the seniors are not displaced, that they feel like this is not something that's only for young people, that they have their activities that they're able to go to. I would like to see spaces for civic groups, right? We have a wealth of civic groups in the district, and sometimes meeting space is very difficult for them to have. So I would want that to be there as well. I'd also want to encourage green space. I want to encourage horticultural activities so that people know how to grow their own fruit included, vegetables, so that they understand that. Cooking classes, things that would make an entire community more self-sufficient. Basketball's great, baseball's great, football's great, swimming's great.
Better add soccer, my friend.
Soccer's great, hockey too, and lacrosse. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, leave anybody out, but
volleyball,
golf. But we need more than that. We need more than just sports. However great sports are, we need cooking. We need to make sure that we have the individuals in the community that, get some tradesmen and women in there.
Do you have a sense that these things are not just you and me talking about them, or that this could be a reality for that part of the Bronx?
I believe it definitely will be. It could. Well, no one say will. I think it could be a reality. I believe that the powers that be, I think that the Speaker and the Councilman King and Borough President all want to see the Northeast Bronx do very well.
There has been a controversial project down over near Bay Plaza, across the highway from Bay Plaza, with the Baychester Square Mall that actually, as I understand, was recently approved. Have you been in favor of it? I know Councilmember King came out early on and said, you know what, here's empty space. Let's put some kind of social services, whether it be a school or a center for seniors. And now it's going to, apparently, I think it's on its way to being a mall. Your point of view?
I think that's still in the ULIP process, I believe. And I'm actually just learning about the project as of late, because, the district lines, I was initially told that it wasn't in my district, and I recently found out that it was in my district. So I'm bringing myself up to speed on the project. I do understand that there will be a component of senior housing. I'm also concerned about the issue with too much retail, so I want to digest the issue a little bit more before I come out with a formal, hard stance on it.
Right. In terms of there were many people who said, well, you have Bay Plaza, which seems to be doing well, but you don't want to start taking business. And of course, there are the traffic issues and all those other kinds of things. Before we wrap it up, let's just look into the crystal ball for the future. Now you're going to be entering your second legislative session, which will, I guess, start after the first of the year. Is that what we're looking at? Talk to me about what realistically, I guess on two levels, what you would work for for yourself and the district? Is there legislation you have in the back of your mind? And then also, of course, on a general sense, what you'd like to see the Senate and the legislature get through?
Well, one, I want a majority for the Democrats. I want us to be in the policy-making position where we can make these common sense gun laws a reality. That's my aspirational goal. That's my wish list. That's my
a
dream.
political goal.
That's
right
my
there.
political goal, right? But legislatively, I'd like to see something around discovery reform. Well, right now, New York State does not have open file discovery, meaning that the prosecutors can essentially withhold the evidence until the time when it goes before trial.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that we need to make sure we're moving the needle on, because we got raise the age in this budget, and it's great. But criminal justice isn't a magic bullet, right? In order to reform the criminal justice system, we need to do more every single day. And I think when you deal with the discovery, giving a more level playing field, I think that can do wonders. So that's something that I'm really going to be paying attention to heavily in my sophomore year.
There you go. And then the last thing would be about local issues. I mean, you've talked about some of the initiatives. Is there anything specific that you want to point to and people could say, that's what the senator is going to work for our neighborhood?
Well, I've been working on issues with autism. The population with parents who have children with autism, we want them to know that you have somewhere to go, that you need to make sure that the schools are taking care of you, that Senator Bailey's office is here to assist you. If I can plug my grand opening of my office coming up this Saturday.
This Saturday?
This Saturday, July 15th, from 12 to 5 at 959 East 233rd Street. I'm going to be
959 East 233rd. That's
Yes.
233rd and where?
It's between Gunther and Bronxwood. It's a long block.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me. Gunther's here and Paulding is here. It's across the street from the Carvel.
Okay. Get some ice cream on a Saturday afternoon and say hello.
It's a good landmark. But from 12 to 5, we're going to have fun games, bouncy house for the children, food, and just come out and meet your neighbors, wherever, if you're from my district or not.
And I would always encourage, because we do a civic-oriented show, I would always encourage people to know where your elected officials' office are, and I know the senator would be happy to receive you or your issues at any time. Senator Bailey, it's one thing to be young, it's another thing to have energy, it's another thing to care, and I think on all three accounts you're doing very well to get started. So
I appreciate
thank you for
that.
being with us today, and I'm sure we're going to invite you and see you again.
I'll see you in the future, guys.
All right, folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on the show or anything going on in the borough of the Bronx, then email them to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. You can send us a tweet at BronxTalk or post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. You can check out the archives at BronxNet.org. Bronx Talk is on the lower right navigation bar. Now, please note that we will conclude our 4-week mini-series with Bronx elected officials on Bronx Talk next week. On July 17, it's the chairman of the Bronx Democratic County Committee, Assemblyman Marcos Crespo, will be with us. We thank our producer, Lisi Dominguez, and our director, William Guzman, and we will see you next week. Good night.
I guess sometimes things just happen. Devastating things. Your whole world changes in an instant. That's what happened to me the day my mother had a stroke.
I'm Paul George, and I want you to spot a stroke fast.
F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911.
Protect the ones you love.
Spot a stroke fast.